Hello, puppies and kittens. We meet again. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible with the usual assemblage. A little bit light because we've got some people that want to take a vacation in Mexico. Yep, they will be.
Posers.
and then we got another person leaving soon.
I am abandoning you briefly. I will return.
Yeah, see?
Hold
awful.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to know that you just can't live without me, Lawrence.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Enough of that. We are reading number 1 Samuel the 17th.
Yes. 1 Samuel 17. Okay.
Close enough. This is a very interesting chapter. So not only is the Hebrew text about twice as long as the Greek text, for reasons
which is always fun.
Yeah, which for reasons we will discuss. But there's also a contradiction in here. Well, I mean, if you compare this to
the hell you say.
No, it's a pretty massive one. This isn't like one of the small things, right? Where it's like, because one of the laws was like when someone puts this pole into through these holes, they should do this thing, compared to other parts where it says they should never even be pulled out of those holes or something like that, right? That's a small discrepancy. No one really cares. This is a bigger one about who killed Goliath.
Oh,
that's what the contradiction is over. The actual slayer of Goliath.
So
isn't that in 2 Samuel though?
That is in 2 Samuel and in 1 Chronicles as well.
Yeah.
That would be the second shooter on the grassy knoll.
Yeah, right. It's a very interesting set of circumstances.
I thought Red Dwarf settled that. It was JFK going back in time. However, what my question then is, in your average NIV standard Bible that your Christian is going to pick up off the shelf or some obnoxious Gideon is going to leave in your hotel room, am I getting the original or the extended edition? Am I getting the Septuagint or the Masoretic text? What am I getting here?
Well, you're getting because generally it contains, your standard Bible is going to have the whole thing. So it's going to have the longer Hebrew text, but it needs to be pointed out that that's also because of, we talked about it kind of last week, how we got those 2 introductions to David. We got another one here. And not only that, but at the end of it, Saul suggests that he doesn't even know who David is. So a lot of
that's what I said last week. This boy who's been playing the demons out of him with his talented fingers, sexy boy, and he'd never seen him before. No idea.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy how many issues there are. And that has to do mostly with the composition of the Deuteronomistic history. But when it comes to the versions that we're going to get, it is going to be, the longer Hebrew text. But yeah,
I think that's why when she found out that this version was going to be bigger, longer, and uncut, that's why Lilith volunteered.
Yeah, those are all true.
I do like potential, girl. However,
how did you know Goliath was going to be introduced again?
Ladies don't tell. No. You're awful. You're awful. But this is a very long chapter.
Literally the words
you're gonna have everything to say about it. So shh. And
I'm literally quoting David.
I know.
So
okay.
I believe you're reading.
Should I actually begin?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good.
David and Goliath.
I think we should read up to 25 maybe, or 1
okay. 25?
Yeah.
Inclusive?
Sure. Yeah, including 25, yeah.
Okay. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Sokoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Damin between Sokoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephraimite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. And Jesse had 8 sons. And in Saul's time, he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. His firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistines came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now, Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit, so that they may all make pizza. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock with a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath the Philistine, champion from Gath, stepped out of his lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel."
So
Okay.
yeah, that is through 25.
So
Quite a few.
they're going to give to thousands of people 10 loaves of bread and 10, according to the translation I'm reading, 10 slices of cheese.
No, it's for his
10
No, no.
brothers. For his
To
brothers.
his brothers, and like they would potentially share with their unit. They're like, this little.
I mean,
It's
I
also
really
to
like.
bribe
the
the,
commander of their 1,000, yeah.
To bribe the
I-
commander.
I would also say I really like the Hebrew for the cheeses. In Hebrew, it's charitzei chalav, literally the cuts of milk.
Yeah, I
like-
recognized that one. See, I recognized that one because milk was one of the words on my Duolingo for Hebrew.
There you go. Cuts of
So the
milk.
thing is, there
Yeah.
is so much to already kind of talk about. So even from the places that they were at, right? So at Soko and Azekah, Gath. So these places have they have some historical significance in this period. So historically speaking, Sukkot, there were 2 actually. There were 2 Sukkos, and this is probably the one in the Shephelah, which is like you can, if you have Israel like on a map, like ancient Israel. It's like the direct center, like wherever you would say like, oh, this is the middle of the land. That's where it would be. Basically, it's this area right there in the middle, and this area was contested over. So it was basically part of this defensive line of cities against the Philistines. So like the people in Judah were fighting against the Philistines, who were like closer to the sea. So they had this defensive line of cities, and this was one of the cities that is historically like part of this defensive line. So the importance of it as being like a battleground does go back to like probably like the early Iron Age 2 period, so like around like the 10th century, I would say 10th century BCE. So there, but like until then we don't really get like a big occupation in the Shephelah region until that 10th century. So and now eventually we do stop having occupations in that area, at least for a little while, up until like, so when Sennacherib, this is shortly after the main crux of the Assyrian invasion. Sennacherib launches this attack in 701 BCE against the region, and people still stayed. There were still people there because it was more of an invasion than anything. But within the next 50, 60 years, people started to move out, and eventually we stopped getting a good amount of people there. So historically, this has been like one of the areas that is hotly contested. And then we kind of go or move over to the place where this Philistine was from. He was from Gath, right? So Gath was actually, we discussed this before. Gath was one of the 5 like main Philistine cities that we've mentioned. So I forget the
It's
word.
come up several times.
Yeah, I forget the word.
I think it's also I think it's the one that's like closest to the Israelites.
Yeah, it's
It's pretty
closer
close,
to it is like closer to Bet Shemesh.
Mhm.
Like if you think of the other places like Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, they're all in the seacoast.
Yeah.
But Gat is
Okay.
like
It's further inland,
it's
yeah.
recognized today as modern Tel Tzafit.
So it was one of these 5 main cities, along with places like Ashdod and Ashkelon, right? But it was not one of the ones that was rebuilt as a fortification in the 12th and 11th centuries. So in the 12th and 11th centuries BCE, these places were, or I should say before that, these places were pretty important. But like we do have evidence of them. It's hard to, I don't know if you want to call it a federation, but like they were like the 5 main cities of the Philistines. So they did like act together. They did share provisions and stuff like that.
Are we
Like
talking kind
after-
of Greek cooperative city states,
Kind
or
of.
more cooperative, more cohesive than that, or less?
You know what? Honestly, we don't. I'm not sure if it was more or less cohesive, but
Okay.
it's certainly like that.
Mhm.
So the it's a loose federation, if you want to call it. So these places all eventually fell, but they were eventually went into ruins, but they weren't like completely abandoned or anything. But then in the 12th and 11th centuries, the places on the coast that we mentioned, or that Tomer just mentioned, that they were rebuilt. And that was the reason for that is they were right on the fucking seacoast, and that is it's better if you want to travel. It's better for for fucking water. Like it's just better.
It's prime real estate.
Exactly,
You
like
need
it's
that.
just
You
better
could
location.
trade from the sea, every kind of and fish, and every kind of resource you can get from the sea. You're always going to have settlements near the sea.
Right. So
This is why they're still to this day pretty the cities or have been populated, and Gath, as Thomas said, is a tell, which is a archaeological site.
Which is why
a ruin.
Tyre is not a ruin and is exactly where it has always been, and you can see it on Google Earth. God failed.
Yeah.
So I think
So
with
Gath
the-
is one of those places that was just not favored because, well, they didn't have like a whole bunch of water.
So in the archaeological history, you're saying that by the 12th century BCE, that Gath was already like not populated.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that.
Well,
Like,
it
the
did. I'm not
stories
sure if it wasn't
remember it.
populated, but it had way less than it had before. The population had severely decreased, so it seems like it didn't get like it wasn't rebuilt as a fortification. So there were still people this is from a couple different archaeological studies, and I think one of them is actually Finkelstein as well. It seems like the population did severely decrease and never fully went up, like back to where it was before. But so it never reached the heights that it was at before. But it wasn't like completely abandoned or anything. It was.
They might have. Did they? Is there any indication they might have kept like a garrison there, considering that Judah was very stabby, and it's good not to leave your back exposed to.
Well, it wouldn't have been very good, is the thing, because
Mm.
the places along the seashore they did receive. They did get rebuilding campaigns in those centuries.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So
Was
there
it-
might
was
have been a provincial outlier kind of a thing at that point.
So would it have been like a cultural memory that the Judahites and Israelites had of the Philistines, like, oh, they were in these cities, even though by the time it was written down, Gath would have been depopulated, the Philistines would have been assimilated or pretty much extinct.
Yeah. So for the Philistines themselves, like these places they still did have that cultural memory, right? Like especially if we consider the Soko, right? Like that was one of the places that was that also we kind of see, the actual population tapered down, but it's still maintained up until the mid 7th century. So like Gath would be in a similar vein, where it wouldn't have been as big at the time that at least these stories were written, but it certainly would have been indicative of their definite enemies of the past, the Philistines. So that part is pretty well known. But it's just a very interesting archaeological record here, and
So it's also interesting that our chapter says that the Philistines encamped at Soko,
right, yeah,
which would have been, which we know from archaeological evidence that was a outpost or something of the Philistines at one point or another.
Well, the thing is, it was a contested area. It was specifically for it was a Judean town that was specifically there to be like a defense against the Philistines. So it would have been historically in control of the Judeans until Sennacherib. Then it would have switched control. So and not even to the Philistines, but yeah, it was historically a very contested place. So a couple other things. So I noticed, Lilith, in your translation, it gave the actual height of him.
Yes, I almost interrupted myself to go down to Hebrew was 6 cubits and a span, about 3 meters. But yeah, I was like, well, we'll definitely talk about his height, because I understand that in certain scrolls he was a bit shorter, and there's definite indications that this was a big fish story.
Yeah,
I'm reading here that
mostly-
the Masoretic text describes him as being 6 cubits in a span.
Yeah.
Whereas the Septuagint says he's 4 cubits in a span.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which would make him 6'9".
Yes, and then the 6 cubits in a span is 9'9", and a span is the length from
depending on your
pinky
definition of a cubit.
Yeah, I mean
okay.
the Hebrew is the Hebrew is zeret, which
Cubit, span.
Yeah,
I
so
think
cubit is this,
Like,
and then span would be this.
yeah, although in modern Hebrew zeret is the pinky finger. But
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, pointing from the pinky to the.
no, but the
Oh,
actual
it's just pinky
finger.
finger. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So
So you want a cubit, not a span. Okay.
yeah, so
Well,
I think
I
it's something
suspect that his height may be one of those situations where he advertises that he's 9 foot. What he says is 9 is really more like 5.5 because it's gold.
Ah, yeah. So like tiny hands with lifts in his shoes, and yeah, I can
think-
see that.
I think his span
Well-
was like was at some point was like exactly half a cubit. Like
And then if we go with the size that the Ark Park, Ken Ham's Ark Park, they said that the cubit was in excess of 20 inches. And
Yeah.
the amount that the Noah's Ark Park uses would put this guy at 12 feet tall.
Well, yeah, but look, I mean, I don't have the relevant experience to say this with authority, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say Ken Ham wildly exaggerates his measurements in every arena.
What an outrageous thing to suspect of someone who has always done that.
A cubit could be as small as 44 centimeters.
Yeah, I mean, it's
up
always
to
different depending
52
on how
or
big you
53.
are as a person.
Yeah, but every
That
society
depends.
would
Are we
probably had
measuring
its standards.
his cubits or someone else's?
Well, typically, traditionally, you would measure the king's cubits. So
Yeah,
What do we
a
say
royal
about
cubit would
small?
normally be bigger than a standard cubit. So like,
But
Just
the
like
king's not going to let you measure his cubit. At
just
most,
like the temple shekel.
at most, he'll make you guess by the apparent volume of his codpiece.
and don't guess low, or you might end up.
Which, by the way, reminds me of the Olympics. Did you see the pole vaulter?
Oh,
yeah, I did. Man, that sucks.
That's
But imagine, here's your excuse. Why didn't I win the gold? Because my dick is too big. My dick is so big that the world watched it in slow motion.
So I also wanted to bring up the so I'm sure you guys noticed. So all of the armor that he has is made of bronze, but then his spear is actually made of iron.
it's tipped with iron, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, beginning of Iron Age, but they still would have had a lot of bronze, and iron would have been expensive. So you keep that, but it's stronger. So you keep that for the stabby part of the spear.
Right, yeah, the important part.
Yeah, exactly.
So
these shekel weights are also a bit exaggerated, right?
The thing is, they might not be, because 5,000 shekels was about 110 pounds.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking you meant the blade itself. No, it's
No, yeah, talking about the 5,000 shekels in weight there.
The
for
breastplate.
everybody's hearing.
The armor. Yeah.
So yeah, about 110 pounds. From talking to a bunch of LARPers, that's apparently not that much. Aaron, is that much? If you're wearing like plate
For a
mail?
full set of armor or just the breastplate?
I think the whole thing.
My armor was
It says the-
reticulated steel and weighed 70 pounds.
Okay, yeah.
I managed to wear it for 8 hours on one battle day. And I remember trying to come off the list field at the end of the fighting, wondering, honestly, sincerely, wondering if I was going to make it back to camp alive just from the weight of the armor.
Right, yeah. So this is like, for someone that would be, let's say 6'9", not a giant, like people like to say, but still a tall person. This wouldn't be like an actual crazy amount. It's still a lot, but it's not like,
because bronze was not as light as the later metals. It was. I'm not.
That's fair. It
as
probably would have had to
metals
be
go.
thicker to be a similar strength for. But also, I think
Yeah.
it's possible that they wanted to show him as being overweight as well. Like this is a guy
everything
who's this
yeah.
guy is he's not a fast fighter. He's a juggernaut. Like he's not going to be. I think maybe they were trying to say that he's like, oh, he has all of these defenses and stuff.
If only he was a juggernaut,
slow.
then he would have had that big, super thick helmet like we see in the movie. And poor little David's little pebbles would have just bounced right off.
You should have
Right,
gone
right.
with the barbarian build.
Yeah.
The lighter armor keeps your mobility intact.
Yeah. I mean, the description of his armor is interesting. There's some words here that we don't really know what they mean, and the different explanations for them are quite interesting. Like, yeah, you have like, oh, he had greaves on his leg. That makes sense. But then Rashi's like, no, he had a nasal that went down to his legs. You know, his the helmet, the thing that sticks out.
Yeah,
over the
Yeah.
nose.
yeah. Ugh.
And
Right,
I
I'm
think
gonna
also
read
the
some-
javelin on his back is also. Rashi says that it could have been a like a
Why wouldn't
flange.
you have a throwing javelin and then your immediate sword for?
Yeah, but it's just the word, I
That's-
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. He said it
So,
was a spike sticking out of the helmet, sort of thing, to protect his
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
you
got
were going to
some,
read some comments?
Yes, I'm going to read some comments. They're stacking up here. Kip Davis says something I can't pronounce, so
It's French.
somebody else do it.
I think it's Saira.
Saida? Which language is that again? I don't
It's
remember.
French. It's a song.
Oh,
It's a French song. It's like connected to the French Revolution. It's apparently a very
yeah,
popular
yeah.
one in France. Saira.
Okay. No idea what that means then.
I think it means
He should
They have
come
It'll
on
be
and
fine.
explain.
It'll be fine. That's the French translation.
yeah, it'll be
Gentlemen?
fine. Yeah, that's
I have been called. I shall return to you. Adieu. Blaspheme much in my absence.
Will do. Will do.
I'm-
Get the fuck out of here. All right, an avid atheist offers $4.99 and says, "Big love from Philly." Thank you very much for that. Lord Illuminous Pooh. Lord Illuminous Pooh.
Good name. I like it.
Yes, offers $5. This is off topic, but Keith from South Africa on the line the other day, a flat earther, goes by Flatzoid. He blocked me for 2 words. Where's Voyager?
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Are you telling me that Arn, were you on the line yesterday? Was that yesterday?
I was on Skep Talk yesterday, and I was on the Sunday show the day before.
Okay. Yeah, Flatzoid. Oh my god.
called
I
in
have
and
seen
he said
so
that.
many. I have to go and watch that clip because I have seen so many debates between Flatzoid and rational people. It's very entertaining.
Okay, and then Matt White says, "Panel, can you confirm Philistines / Philistia morphed over the ages to Palestine?"
Yeah, I think that's the
The
Greek word
word.
for. I mean, the Hebrew is paleshet, and that the
Right,
Greek
right.
word is Palestinoi, something like that. I saw that how it is translated in Josephus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Palestina is like the Latin version of Philistia, and
Yeah.
yeah, so
that
the
seems
word is
so
connected.
obvious. I'm embarrassed that I didn't notice that.
I do remember seeing some weird like folk etymology that said that it was actually a translation. So Philistia is Philistia, but Palestina is a translation of Israel because they both mean wrestler,
Wrestler?
I
And then-
haven't seen that one.
something like that.
And then Kip Davis says, "Did anyone ever watch the show of Kings and Prophets? It aired on ABC in 2016. It's all about David's rivalry with Saul."
See, this is where Dr. Kip Davis gets all of his information from television.
Oh, because the
Huh.
only rivalry with Saul that I was aware of was his rivalry with Heisenberg. But that I think
Wow,
was a different
okay.
show.
Wow, good stuff. There's a
I actually
reference.
wanted to ask if people had read or watched the BBC / HBO show His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, and I wonder what they thought of it, of how he portrays the religious concepts and stuff. It's very interesting. I guess no one has.
No, I have not seen it.
It's like a multiverse thing where there's it's like the church is the enemy, and I think it's like based on like Paradise Lost in a way, but like turned on its head, where the authority or Yahweh whatever is actually just an angel, and there's like a war to defeat him.
I see. Okay.
It's very interesting. There's a TV, if you can see the TV show, I would recommend it.
So before we hop into Tomer's commentary, there is a couple things I want to know here. So the this wager, right, where he's like looking for like, where's the real challenge, right? Like, give me a real fight. Uh, like even though Saul is like right there, he's like, no, you guys are slaves of Saul. Where's the real person that's gonna fight me? This was actually not like a super uncommon thing.
Yeah.
Because like if you think about it, if these two warring towns are pretty small, uh, you're not gonna want a big bath where everyone dies. You're gonna be like, okay, well, we're gonna determine the winner from like choosing a champion. Basically, it wasn't that uncommon.
Yeah. I think Bar-Efrat actually notes some parallels. I think in Greek tradition. I need to check this.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff in the in the
Iliad.
Homeric,
Yeah,
in the
Iliad.
Iliad with Achilles.
Yeah. One last thing I just say, like someone mentioned, like the show is better than the movie. Like, yeah, don't watch the movie. The guy who made the movie was trying to appease like American audiences, and so he downplayed all of the church magisterium stuff, so that once you get them in, then they'll watch the second movie, and then he'll bring it in. But like, they did so badly that they never did the second movie. So yeah, don't watch the movie. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I should know that Bar-Efrat notes the Iliad, specifically the third book. There is described a battle between Paris of Troy and Menelaus of Greek in 85 to 95, and in the seventh book between Hector of Troy and Aias of Greek, 66 to 91.
Yeah,
What is that
the Iliad's such a bummer. Anyways, so that's my hot take on ancient literature. The Iliad actually kind of sucks.
Of course it does.
Yeah,
Okay.
it does.
Yeah, cry some more. So we'll start on verses 1 through 3. Klein comments, the account opens with the Philistine and Israelite armies facing one another across a ravine in southwest Judah. Socho is identified with Khirbet Abad. The ancient name is preserved in the neighboring Khirbet Shuweika, 14 miles west of Bethlehem. Compare 2 Chronicles 17:7 and 28:18. Some 2 or 3 miles to the northwest was Azekah, modern Tel Ez Zachariah. Ephes Damim is located by V. Gold and McCarter at Damun, 4 miles northeast of Socho. The site may be the same as Pas Damim, found in 1 Chronicles 11:13 and compare 2 Samuel 23:9. The valley of the Terebinth, compare verse 19, 21:10, which is not in the Old Testament, lay in an east-west axis to the north of Socho and is called by the same name to this day, in Arabic Wadi Es-Sanat. And there's also a beer, an Israeli craft beer called the Valley of Elah.
Yeah. You can go there. You can go to the battlefield.
Yeah.
Of David and Goliath.
Yeah. Maybe not now, but once everything will calm down. Okay, so on verse 4, a champion. In Hebrew, it's Ish Habanim, literally the man of between. Traditional commentators generally take the word between to refer to between the battalions or armies. The Septuagint and Peshitta read a mighty man or warrior, probably influenced by verse 51, where Goliath is called a Gibor. McCarter renders a certain infantryman, basing himself on the war scroll, where the term is used frequently to refer to infantrymen, and by the Devoe. Opinion of Devoe.
Yeah, I like the idea that it's based on the verb to mean to build. So he was a man that was well built.
Yeah.
Like,
you would like that, wouldn't you? So
like a building of a man, I guess you could say.
I guess. Now on Goliath, the exact etymology or origin of the name is unclear. Most commentators take the word Goliath to be non-Semitic, either Philistine or Anatolian. McCarter notes similar name endings, yat in Hittite, watash, and Lydian, watis. Tsumura notes the Ugaritic Goliath or Galiat /n from the 2nd millennium BCE, but writes that the name might originally have been Anatolian or Aegean, which was used in ancient Ugarit. Goliath's name appears only 2 times in this chapter, in verses 4 and 23, and is frequently called the Philistine, anonymously. Bar-Efrat writes that this led some scholars to speculate that in the original story, the Philistine hero was anonymous, and the name Goliath was borrowed from 2 Samuel 21:19.
And also the word, am I right in saying that the word Goliath and Colossus is related?
I haven't heard that.
I don't think so. Colossus? No idea.
I'm thinking of a different word in English that means big, that comes from Goliath.
I mean, now we just kind of say Goliath to mean like monstrous or large. Like Goliath itself has kind of become that kind of word.
Yeah. Now, on 6 cubits and a span, in Hebrew it's shesh amot vazaret. The length of an amma, cubit, is around 45 centimeters or 18 inches, but the length of a zeret, span, is unclear, but is taken by some, like McCarter and Tsumura, to be around 23 centimeters or 9 inches. Thus, Goliath's height would have been around 3 meters or 9 feet 10 inches. Septuagint, Lucianic Recension, Josephus, in Antiquity 6, 171, and 4Q Samuel A read 4 cubits and a span, shortening his height to around 2 meters or 6 feet 7 inches. McCarter takes this reading to be the original and writes that the Masoretic text is an exaggeration. He notes Michael Coogan's opinion that 6 cubits anticipates the 600 in verse 7. Klein, however, writes that the Septuagint perhaps intends to tone down the report. Tsumura writes that when one considers the huge size of his weapons, 6 cubits makes better sense. Citing J. N. Ford, he writes that such gigantism likely resulted from a dysfunction of the pituitary gland.
Oh,
Sorry.
the pituitary gland. Okay.
Pituitary gland, yeah. Fuck English. And citing W.J. Martin, he notes that one John Middleton, circa 1600 AD, was claimed to be around 2.8 meters or 9 feet 3 inches. Yeah. On verses 5 through 7, some scholars compared the description of Goliath's armor with that of other cultures, especially Greek and Minor Asia, which were the Philistines' origin. Bar-Efrat, for example, notes that Goliath's equipment is very similar to that of the Iliad heroes, as seen in Book 3, sections 328 to 338.
I just knew you were going to be talking about Goliath's equipment.
Was that a euphemism?
Oh. But by the way,
Good job for catching on to that one.
by the way, Tomer, it's Asia Minor, not Minor Asia.
Oh, is it? What?
Yeah.
I for some reason, I knew that was Asia Minor. You know what?
It's
Sorry.
fine, guys. It's fine.
I'm stupid. Okay, blame me.
It's all right. I fully get you with English.
When
I get
Asia
it.
was young. and a
Yeah,
minor.
when. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
There's someone in the comments who thinks the Septuagint is the original. Is that the thing?
I saw it.
God.
Just ignore it. I just ignore it.
Yeah.
They're wrong. They're incorrect. But just
Yeah,
ignore it.
I mean, just reading First Samuel and the Septuagint just convinced me that the Septuagint is probably the translation. I mean, it's so much transliteration on that. I mean, like,
Yeah. There's the
exactly.
thing is the fact that whenever you see something in Hebrew that actually means something, but you only see it transliterated in the Greek where it doesn't mean anything, is a point in favor of a Hebrew text being original.
Okay, I'll continue. Auld writes that the nature of the armor, as well as the challenge to a duel between two champions, suggests the classical Greek world, and they date no earlier than the Persian period. Klein notes Yadin's opinion that Goliath carried a typical ancient javelin, which had a loop and a cord wrapped around it to facilitate long-distance throws. Tsumura writes that Goliath's weapons could have been imported from northern Syria or Anatolia, as well as from Egypt, if not directly from the Aegean. On verses 12 to 31, These verses do not appear in the Septuagint, or at least the Vaticanus, as well as verses 41, 48b, 50, 51a, 55 through 58, and chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. Klein
Yeah, a
notes
whole
that
bunch of missing stuff. It's crazy.
Yes, yes, it really is. Klein notes that Wellhausen and Driver saw that the Vaticanus as an attempt at harmonization by omitting sections of the original text. However, because the shorter text conflicts with the context, an increasing number of scholars argue that the Septuagint represents the original text, and that the Masoretic text has been expanded. Tsumura, however, argued that these scholars, quote, seem to overemphasize the difference of edition, traditions, perspectives, or even theologies between the two versions, quote unquote, end quote. He further writes, quote, R. Paulsen argues for the Masoretic text integrity on literary grounds by noting repetitions or alternations of verbal forms and dialogue patterns. Bergen notes the author's narrative techniques in lengthening the narrative account by the, quote, inclusion of non-narrative information, end quote, such as the description of Goliath and his weapons in verses 4 to 7, and the information about David's family in verses 12 to 14. Paulsen reminds us that, quote, repetition is the mother even of discourse-oriented learning, end quote. Certainly, repetitious expressions are typical of a narrative, which is fundamentally an oral, quote-unquote, text. Straight and strict exegetical efforts to read and seek the plain meaning of the text are needed foremost before accepting inconsistencies, quote-unquote, or discrepancies, quote-unquote, in an ancient narrative, end quote. Auld, however, writes that while, quote, many attempts have been made to portray the shorter Hebrew text underlying the Vaticanus as a deliberate simplification of the more complex narrative in the Masoretic text, end quote, the more economical theory appears preferable. Quote, that a shorter, simpler narrative, i.e. the Septuagint, the Vaticanus, was substantially expanded to produce the Masoretic text, rather than that the complex Masoretic text was first composed out of different sources, and the resultant text then simplified, Vaticanus, end quote. The largest of these pluses, verses 12 to 31, is crucial to this argument, quote unquote, and that several indications show that quote, this was never part of an independently existing source text, but rather a deliberate supplement designed to indicate points of comparison and contrast between Saul and David as each first appeared on Israel's stage, end quote.
You know, for me, the part that makes it, at least for me, the part that makes it more, if more likely that the longer version is like the original, and this is, you know, like after we already have like a compilation of sources in the Deuteronomistic history, is the fact that the inclusion of this, I don't know why why the author of, or by the translator of the Masoretic text would be, why they would include the whole thing at the end where he suggests that he doesn't know where Saul doesn't know David, because at that point in time we're already talking about a period where the other stories are already compiled. So if you put it together way later, you can already look back on the fact that they know each other and be like, well, what, like, why would this be here? So the fact that the Septuagint the Septuagint translators don't include it, you know, the part where he suggests that he doesn't know David, to me, that makes it that's one of the things that is more likely to be taken out than put in. So at least for those verses, it's pretty clear that the Masoretic text preserves the closer original reading than the Septuagint does. Now, which one might be, you know, more reflective of the original text when it comes to the other sections? I'm not 100% sold on either position, but at least for the ending verses, I think that the Masoretic text probably preserves the original. or more likely original. I always need to say that because I don't think we have any originals or have any access to original readings. So I always have to say more likely original.
That's what fascinates me about archaeology is that anybody, I mean, you're just at some point, somebody's going to find something old enough to be incriminating to the whole thing.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Now on verse 12, he was very old. In Hebrew, zaken baba anashim, literally old, going in the people. The meaning of going in the people is unclear. The term refers either to elderly age, according to Kimchi, Gassanidis, and Abavanel, or, quote, went out with multitudes and entered with multitudes, end quote, according to Talmud Berachot 58a, meaning that Jesse was a well-respected person, according to Rashi and Ditrani. Vulgate, Peshitta, and the Lusanic Recension read advanced in years, which is preferred by some commentators like McCarter, Klein, and Bar-Efrat, who amend the text to Bashanim. Tsumura renders had become a senior. On verse 15, McCarter sees this verse as attempting to reconcile the contradiction between this chapter and the previous one, which state that David was brought to Saul's court to play for him. Tsumura, however, writes that the discrepancy between the two narratives portions has been overemphasized, quote-unquote. He notes that, according to R.P. Gordon, verse 15 explains how David was not in the Israelite camp when Goliath was issuing his challenge. David was both Saul's weapon bearer and shepherding his father's flock. On verse 18, assurance. In Hebrew, it's arubatam. The exact meaning of this term is unclear. The word aruba is also found in Proverbs 17:18 in the sense of a token or pledge. Rashi wrote that aruba is an expression of salvation, as seen in Psalms 119-122. Assure arov, your servant, for good. Most traditional commentators take it as their pledge that they gave to someone so that they would get food in return. Likewise, Klein writes that the pledge is some token that would confirm the safe delivery of their goods and their own well-being. Some rabbinic commentators, like Talmud Shabbat 56a, take the aruba to be a bill of divorcement of their wives. Van Staldiner Solman explains that soldiers who went to battle were supposed to divorce from their wives in case they died or got lost. The divorce was conditional, i.e., it is retrospectively valid if the husband died.
Okay, so the soldiers don't need to worry about getting those Dear John letters, do they?
Yes.
They're already divorced.
Yeah. Other suggestions include bring me news of them, according to the Peshitta, learn with whom they are placed, according to Vulgate and Kara, and bring me their baggage, according to Ditrani. And finally, on verse 25, he will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. The Hebrew Bible reads, and his father's household shall be made free in Israel. Klein writes that a free family, quote-unquote, might be excused from paying taxes or from corvée obligations. He notes Lemche's opinion, I hope I pronounced it right, that free men were a class of clients who were supported by allocations of plots of land for cultivation and by gifts of supplies from the royal stores. The word for free, chofshi, is used to denote the opposite of slavery, as we see in Exodus 21:2. Tsumura notes the Akkadian chupshu and Ugaritic chepet, referring to a particular lower social class in the lower part of the economic order, but writes that the Hebrew term seems to have a more general meaning. Citing Anson Reini, he notes the Akkadian adjective zaki, used to describe an emancipated slave woman, or a soldier who was exempt from service to the palace because of a brave deed slaying a rebel. He writes, quote, the latter is a striking semantic parallel to the present passage, end quote. Targum reads, and make his father's house commanders in Israel, indicating the reward was a promotion in the army, a reward which David does get in 18:5. That's it for my commentary on this part.
All right. So we got through 25.
Yes.
All right. So I guess you know what. Let's see how long I'm able to talk for. I am feeling better, on the COVID front. So I think let's see if I can read this all the way through. Shall we?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, I'm having some trouble with my microphone.
Yeah, that I see that.
Yeah, it's moving.
So David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?"
Wait, he's 9 foot tall and uncircumcised?
He wasn't Jewish.
You did-
The people answered him in the same way. So shall it be done for the man who kills him. His eldest brother, Eliab, heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, "Why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down just to see the battle." David said, "What have I done now? It was only a question." He turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul said to David, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God." David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag, in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine. I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." When the Philistine drew near to meet David, David ran quickly to the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and stone, striking down the Philistine and killing him. There was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grasped his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him. Then he cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The troops of Israel and Judah rose up with a shout and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sharaim as far as Gath and Ekron. The Israelites came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. When Saul, and this is where it gets, this is the part that's like not included, that gets really weird and suggests that Saul doesn't know David. When Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this young man?" Abner said, "As your soul lives, O king, I don't know." The king said, "Inquire whose son the young man is." On David's return from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite." So that's the end of chapter 17. But remember the introductory stories to David in the previous chapter. He is very much aware of Jesse and the fact that this is one of his sons, but not here. So
Yeah,
there is. So wait, what's
there's
up?
a few possible ideas here. I think that you
One
could
of the
argue.
apologetics that I often
Well, when
hear
he
is,
says
well,
whose son are
maybe
you?
they're just lying.
Well, the thing is, when you make, oh yeah, one of them are just lying, right. That's a fun one. It actually makes way more sense. The whole thing makes way more sense if we realize that these are actually multiple compositions being stitched together. So
For sure.
that is
I mean,
a
it's-
very common apologetic, but then it doesn't explain all of the occurrences. Sometimes it explains them, or like at the end of Samuel. We're gonna get like the death of Saul, and then that actually contradicts the very first chapter in the next book as to who killed him, because either it was his like one of his
Apprentices.
apprentices. Thank you. It was a good. I was trying to think of a word for it. Or was it an enemy Amalekite? And people were always like, oh well, obviously the Amalekite was just lying and just taking the whatever. The thing is, lying might explain some of the occurrences. It definitely doesn't explain all of them. But looking at multiple compositions that were stitched together, that explains more stuff than anything else. So because
Yeah,
of that, it becomes the more likely option. And
yeah, just like one explanation for verse 55 is like he could have been asking like what's his lineage.
Oh,
well, sure, but he already knows the lineage.
I
No,
have
no,
a
not just
long.
who is his father, but like who is he descended from? Like,
Yeah.
is
I
he
have a
a
long
threat
quote.
or is he a blessing?
Yeah,
sort of thing?
I have a long quote from Rashi from
Oh, yeah.
so Rashi's explanation. I mean, he cites Talmud by Yevamot 76b, but I'll get to that.
Sure, yeah.
It's long, but it's amusing.
So let's talk about who killed Goliath, right? So here it's obviously David. In 2 Samuel 21:19, it's Elhanan. And in 1 Chronicles 25, it actually says that Elhanan killed Lami, Goliath's brother. So we have a few complications here with the story. And in the AV, that's the authorized version. In the AV, it says in 2 Samuel 21:19, where it initially says Elhanan killed Goliath, it says there that in this version, in the authorized version, it says that Elhanan killed the brother of Goliath's, but that's probably just to make it fall in line with the part in First Chronicles. So the thing is, we know that these authors used sources. So the earliest story is probably Elhanan. So Elhanan is probably the one who originally, in whatever original source the authors were using, is probably the one who killed Goliath. But because you like to attribute heroic tasks to your heroes, the author here in this 1 Samuel 17 is saying that, oh, well, it's actually David who killed Goliath. So they are taking over like an entirely different story arc, someone else's story arc, and not even really a story arc. It's mostly just a mention in those other places, and just attributing it to David. So it's really interesting how, because of the state of Josianic propaganda, how we get from what is more likely to be real history in the whole Elhanan killing Goliath. Now, whether Goliath was a giant, he probably wasn't a giant, but part of this enemy group, right? That may have been an actual, and we know they're talking about the same Goliath because they use the exact same phrase to describe the weapon, for example. Where was it? He says that the weapon is God, where was it? It's somewhere in here, but they use the exact same phrase to describe the weapon, or like they just describe the.
Khanit, maybe? Where is it?
Well, I'm not sure about it's like a whole phrase.
Oh, okay.
Where they describe the actual spear. Oh, it was like a weaver's beam. That's what they use. Yeah. So we know it's the same person because that's the exact same description that's always given of the weapon. So it is interesting how it went from Elhanan to David's story, and then how later scribes would instead put in those little ways to fix the story, like in the authorized version of 2 Samuel 21, where they say that they say that he slew the brother of Goliath to make it line up with the section of First Chronicles, which was using the Deuteronomistic history as a source. So it's a very interesting way that these are all interconnected. It's I always thought this stuff was really cool, and we see lots of hints of this kind of stuff. So like when David goes on to become king over all Israel, right? And one of the things that keeps popping up during his reign is that like God is on his side, right? So when he's saying that that Goliath is going up against like the Lord himself, or like the Lord's people himself, right? There's this implication that God was with David. Now, of course, this is also Josianic propaganda. In 2 Samuel 5, for example, all the tribes actually came to David to ask him to be king. He didn't have to conquer them like other kings did, right? They had to like Joshua, he went out conquering, and if you wanted to take over a place, you would conquer it. But no. These people were putting David up on this pedestal, because they just went up to him and said, "Hey, could you do this?" Because the actual successor to Saul would, of course, be Jonathan, his son, and then even Jonathan is so firmly behind David that a lot of people, me included, see a lot of homosexual undertones there.
Yeah, he was very firm behind David.
Yeah, very firmly behind David. We can it's okay. We'll just call them roommates. Yeah, there's quite a bit, right? So when we're talking about how it's also a very interesting parallel between this David and Samson, for example, that not only the killing of the lion thing with his bare hands, but also just the fact that he likes to beat up Philistines. Good old connection there. But it's probably just a general hero outline instead of I mean, it could be direct knowledge, but not like a direct copy, or like directly writing him in a certain way to look like Samson, because if we're talking about the same composition, we could have like the same author could have been writing this and also the Samson portion. So it's not really a necessity that the Samson story is a prerequisite, but that is interesting thing that I noticed. There's also one thing about I mentioned this before about the amount of doublets there are, how many introductions there are, and the fact that is way easier explained through multiple traditions being stitched together rather than someone always lying in these. there have been some attempts to reconstruct what an original would be, or what like an original reading of this would be. The ones that I've seen so far, especially one from Humphreys, it isn't great in my opinion. There are a lot of open questions with that reconstruction where he pulls like a certain set of verses here and then skips like a verse to go to like this other one. And looking at it that way, it is very interesting to see the stitches, but I don't think he actually does a great job of it. In fact, Dietrich and Newman or Naumann, I guess Naumann, I don't know how to pronounce it. They wrote a paper together in which they point out that his selected verses were probably chosen just because they share the same theme rather than actually creating like a full flowing story. So yeah, there have been a lot of potential reconstructions of what is possibly the original text, and none of them are perfect. But that's because this text has a very long there's a long textual history. Stuff gets very complicated. But either way, yeah, we can hop into anyone else's commentary. That's what I got so far.
Yeah, I'll start. On verse 26, Klein comments, David asks a question whose answer has already been supplied to the reader, but he thereby puts the challenge in its proper theological perspective. This man is an uncircumcised Philistine, compare 14:6. He is a reproach to Israel since he has himself reproached or challenged the battle ranks of the living God. The references to a living God in verses 26 and 36, compare 2 Kings 19:4, come in a context where a foreigner has slandered Israel's God. In Jeremiah 10 verses 6 through 10, the living God is contrasted with idols. The giant's attempt to curse David by his dead God is ineffective, verse 43. Dagon, the god of the Philistines, has already been shown up as dead in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 5.
And so this is the source of the colloquialism, doggone it.
Oh my God, Aaron. Uh-huh.
It was also
Dad jokes are at their very best when they cause you physical pain.
Aaron, it's also the inspiration for the song Uncircumcised Philistine by the singer called Little Kenny, otherwise known as Kenneth Copeland. For people who haven't seen that, that's a brilliant song, by the way.
All right.
Did you share that on the Discord?
Can I share it on the Discord? Sure.
Did you share it on the Discord?
Not yet, but I will.
Okay.
Now on verse 28, and it's a bit long, Auld comments, David's big brother Eliab is enraged by his talk. We readers know that he is one of the few who are privy to Samuel's having anointed the family's junior son. Privy. Thank you, English. and we may suspect that he is jealous that the family's honor would be impugned. Oh my fucking God, I hate
Yeah,
you
just
so
read it like
much.
it sounds. Privy is an abbreviation of privileged, right? Or privileged position.
I can't think about it right now. How am I
Oh.
supposed to tell?
I thought it had something to do with private because it also means it's also a nickname for a
Yeah,
private.
I mean private.
I'm in the privy.
Yeah.
It's very posh.
Impugned. Okay. That he is jealous that the family's honor would be impugned by big talk in public on the part of the youngest member. He uses age-old tactics to return Junior to his proper place. He has only a few sheep anyway. He is careless of their welfare. His concern for his brother's welfare is no more than a pretense to let him view the action. However, unbraiding David, now for entrusting his sheep to another, seems strange if he has been visiting them regularly over the previous 40 days. Eliab here uses the verb the narrator has used, natash, when reporting David's leaving sheep first of all, in verse 20, and then luggage in verse 22 in safe deposit. Leaving his sheep in the care of a watcher has been implied in Jesse's commission to David to visit his brothers and attend to their needs. What his father would think about his not delivering his provisions directly to his brothers is not said. But another father, i.e. Saul's, has already shown in 10:2 how a smaller concern should be let be, quote unquote, also natash when a larger one emerges. On verse 31, McCarter takes verse 31 to be, quote, entirely redactional, penned by an editor who interpolated the alternative account of David's arrival at court into the primary narrative, end quote. Klein writes that verse 31, quote, forms a transition to the original account, which presumably located David in the army camp all along, end quote. On verse 32, let no one lose heart. Hebrew Bible reads, Al yipol lev adam. Let not a man's heart drop. Bar-Efrat writes that David says a man out of respect for the king. The Septuagint reads, on no account let the heart of my Lord collapse upon him. Tsumura notes that Aryeh van der Kuy took the Septuagint as a secondary exegetical rendering. On verse 35, I seized it by its hair. The Hebrew Bible reads, I seized it by the beard, biskano. McCarter notes Stobe's observation that while this may make sense with reference to a lion, it is not to a bear. The Septuagint reads, I caught it by its throat, reading begrono. McCarter writes that the Masoretic text arose by confusion of gimel for zayin and ro for kuf. Tsumura, however, writes that as the verbs describing the animal's action... Sorry?
You said raw for kuf.
Ro, yes. Resh vav for kuf.
Ah, okay. That makes more
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
So, yeah, sorry, I had to be more specific there.
Yeah. So the one letter was misread as two letters.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
the other way around.
Tsumura, however, writes that as the verbs describing the animal's action are singular, David is probably describing his fight with a lion, which represents wild animals, and is the first of the two animals mentioned. On verse 36, from this uncircumcised Philistine to the living God. Now the Septuagint reads, and the uncircumcised Allophiles shall be like one of these. Shall I not go and smite him and take away today a reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised one who reproached the ranks of the living God? End quote. McCarter notes that Josephus, in Antiquity 6, 183, seems to have known of the shorter Masoretic text reading, and that, quote, it is difficult to decide whether the longer text of the Septuagint reflects original material or secondary expansion, end quote. He writes, quote, critics who favor the Masoretic text, like Stobe, point to the almost identical wording of verse 26 as a probable source of the intrusive material. But verse 26 is part of the material missing from the Septuagint, which displays the longer reading here. Moreover, the Masoretic text as it stands seems rather abrupt. Tentatively, we assume that Masoretic text has suffered haplography from ha'arel hazeh ke'echad meh, that uncircumcised as one of them, to ha'arel hazeh ki charaf meh, that uncircumcised who reproached, which has been partially repaired by the restoration of ke'echad mehem as part of them. It's cheref, not chaf.
I think maybe there's another comment that we could probably get in quickly.
Yeah. Yes, please, Arn.
Supercilious Pseudonym says for $5, did they have bears in the Levant?
Yes, there were, but in Israel, no.
Not
I
anymore.
think not anymore. Yeah, maybe at zoos, but in the wild, no.
Yeah, so there is a type of brown bear or a subspecies of brown bear which is known as the Syrian brown bear, which you can still it's not extinct. It's like, but you can only really find them like in the Caucasus, like Georgia, Armenia, I think also like Turkmenistan, but like they're extinct in the Levant, like Israel, Syria, but they would have been there until like probably
how large are
the
they?
Until the 20th century, basically.
They're small, like I mean they're the same species as the American brown bear, I think. No.
The American brown bear is large.
It's Ursus arctos, but it's a subspecies, which is
Not the grizzly, the brown bear. I assume you mean the smaller brown
yeah,
bear.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we have what we call brown bears are very often
Oh, maybe
enormous. The
Okay.
Kodiak brown bear has been measured up to 14 feet tall.
That's I think that's a little different. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the women still chose the bear. Also, hi guys.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay. Apparently, well, there is the smallest subspecies of the brown bear, about 2 to 2.5 meters in length, and weighing up to 250 kilo. So they were pretty. Maybe they're pretty small now, but maybe they were bigger back in the day when they had more range. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bears are everywhere, literally all across the world, except for
There were
perhaps
also
Australia.
lions. There were also lions in the Levant.
But think about koalas, red pandas,
Yeah.
I believe, are a close relative of bears.
Not koalas.
No, red pandas.
No, red
aren't
pandas
bears.
are not. The black
Aren't
and white panda, the black and
Is a
white,
bear.
what I forget. There's another name for that panda, but the giant panda. The giant panda actually is a bear.
Yes.
But the red panda is a procyanid.
Yeah, it's
more
like
akin to a raccoon.
Right? I was thinking it was probably closer to the raccoon, but again, these things branch. They've got.
I think when the Europeans first described the panda bear, they thought they didn't think it was a bear. I think, which is weird, and that's why it's called panda, because it's the giant version of the red panda.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't recognize it as a bear because it ate bamboo.
Because it didn't eat meat. Yeah.
It could eat meat. It's just too lazy, and bamboo is, which honestly, that's the best argument for vegetarianism. I am too damn lazy to go catch something. I'm gonna eat this stick.
And
I respect
the fact that a few hundred years ago people saw a panda bear and were like, yeah, that's a giant raccoon. It's like it gives it more credence to like the Bible, where where you have the whole like whales are fish and bats are birds and whatnot, and like the way that we look at what a category is so changed to now, from then to now, is like, there's no way to. They weren't wrong. They just had a different system.
Oh, sorry guys. I was just checking the chat. Some guy named Josephus is using the kind of word vomit that you see on Spirit Science. Lots of stuff about.
I'm choosing not to engage with chat today.
Yeah, no, fair.
And I see that they're having a conversation with Kip Davis, so good luck with that.
Yeah, actually, Kip asked us
Have
what
fun,
the
guys.
smallest bear is. So,
Yeah.
Oh no.
And I
legit
just
bear.
remembered. I believe I have a discussion scheduled with this character.
With Kip Davis?
No, with the other one.
Josephus,
Oh,
we
okay.
know.
Oh, the other one.
Sunbears.
The other one just left because I corrected him on his spelling of there, and that did it. And he unsubscribed and left.
Okay. That's fine.
Unsubscribed.
Yes.
That's fine.
I doubt someone.
I hope your
doubt someone
channel will
who's reading
survive
context at
one less
Trinity.
subscriber, Arn. So my apologies that I made him unsubscribe.
Grammar correction.
Yeah.
I doubt someone who's reading classics at Trinity College, Dublin, also known as University of Dublin, would get those two confused. Yeah, sorry.
By the way,
I
Isaac,
just-
I posted the song in the Discord server, and because we all know that the host of that Discord server is struggling, I will post the links in chat for people who want to listen to that song. Maybe you'll get some people to go on the Discord server.
Yeah.
Well-
Dr. Kip, the smallest bear species apparently is the sun bear, the one with like the like yellow
Sun
orange.
bears are cute
like,
as hell.
patch. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're small.
They're teeny. They're small. Small. SMOL. Small. However, where did you guys get to in my absence? Because
38.
I assume you have. Okay, I was like, I assume you have not got
We
to
were
David
almost
buying
finished
it.
with Tomir's commentary.
No, yeah,
Oh
we
my
already read
God!
it. We read the thing.
We read the chapter and we're up to 38 in the commentary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have 11 pages for this chapter, so good luck. On verse
See,
38.
you already missed everything. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Drinking. What does it look like?
Okay, on verse 38, Saul dressed David in his own tunic. Hebrew for own tunic is madav. Rashi read madav from midah, measurement, and thus Saul's garment changed and became David's size. Yeah.
Just
because
like the ring of power.
Yeah, just like that. Abravanel, however, wrote that Saul's garment was similar in size to that of Goliath. The Septuagint reads, Saul put a woolen cloak on David. This meaning is favored by McCarter and Klein, the former writing that the Masoretic text Madav anticipates verse 39, and the word venatan he gave is syntactically impossible.
I wonder if it meant like a woolen, what they called, like a cap, because you wouldn't really wear helmets on your bare head. Wouldn't be great, because if you got hit, the metal would just smash your head in. So you want to have
but it
some
could still
sort of
prevent glancing blows and probably keep
Yeah.
away arrows. So like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, but
you're
it was
getting
very
hit
common.
hard enough,
I think it
with
was.
a
I think
mace.
most people would wear some sort of cloth underneath a helmet, because
Yeah.
those two things together are very protective.
do we have any super chats we're waiting on? Sorry, I just saw something in
No.
the chat.
I don't think we do. No, I think we're all of them.
No, yeah, we're caught up.
Okay.
On verse 40, 5 smooth stones, I just included this humorous interpretation. According to Midrash Shmuel 21:20, the 5 stones symbolize God, Aaron, and the 3 founding fathers.
Sure.
Okay, whatever.
Oh, you mean the forefathers, not like.
The 3.
Yeah, but the way you said founding fathers, it sounded like the church.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I might.
It actually
I
sounds like
don't-
he's talking about America.
No, the patriarchs, you know.
Yeah. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
more
the
sense.
patriarchs.
I'm
yeah.
thinking of
The
yeah.
patriarchs of America.
Forefathers,
Patriots.
FORE.
Did we mention at all the idea that Goliath was personally responsible for, according to, I don't know, maybe a midrash or a targum, for taking the Ark of the Covenant and killing both Hophni and
Yeah, we
Phinehas?
Yeah, I did. I think I mentioned that in
okay, you
was it
mentioned it.
Samuel 1 Samuel 5, where it mentions that Saul was the Benjaminite who fled who fled from the battlefield and informed Eli about it.
Okay,
Uh,
but also
Goliath
that Goliath
was
was the one.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think I mentioned it.
Gotta love it.
Yeah. Now on verse 43, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? The Septuagint reads, am I like a dog that you come upon me with a rod and stones? And David said, no, but worse than a dog, end quote. This meaning is attested by Josephus in Antiquity 6:186. Based on this, McCarter writes that the Septuagint may be the original reading, by assuming haplography triggered by confusion between bemakel, with a stick, and mikelev, from a dog. Tsumura quotes R.P. Gordon, quote, the Septuagint with a staff and stones aims at exactitude, but misses the point. The stones are not visible.
Right, that's true. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. You see, that guy was right. The Septuagint is the original.
Yeah.
No.
On verse 49, the
Yeah,
forehead...
I think people might get
Sorry.
confused about, like, the Septuagint can, because our earliest Septuagint manuscripts are older than a lot of our earliest, like, besides the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Masoretic.
like,
Yeah, the
definitely
Masoretic texts are
complete,
medieval.
right? Like the
Mhm.
we have a complete Masoretic from, like, was it 8th century?
No,
and the
12.
complete-
Like,
Really?
no, yeah, like Leningrad, Aleppo, they're like medieval, like 10th, 11th, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
somewhere around there. Yeah.
So what am I
so-
thinking?
so when
I'm
it comes to,
thinking of
like,
the actual Tyrian
complete-
system.
When it comes to
Tyrian.
complete like biblical canons, sure.
Yeah.
That would be like, I think our earliest Septuagint manuscripts are like what, from the 4th century, early 4th century. We do have
Yeah.
some Greek
Three-
fragments that are older. And then
Yeah.
we also have Hebrew fragments that are far older
Way
from
old,
the Dead Sea
yeah.
Scrolls.
And there's even earlier like enchantments and stuff as well, which are like possibly quote.
Oh, sure,
Like,
sure.
yeah.
You could still
Um,
have like a scroll, like a book preserved
Yeah.
that's older, but not a whole canon.
Well, what
Right.
I
We
think,
know for a fact that the Septuagint isn't the original and the Hebrew isn't a translation of the Septuagint, but there are times when the earliest Hebrew manuscript it is evidently corrupted because we can see that the Septuagint, which is a slightly older, a few centuries older, what's the word? It like preserves an older reading.
right.
Right.
If we could tell that if we had a Hebrew version that was the same age or older than the Septuagint, it would be more similar to the Septuagint in those verses.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
sometimes the Septuagint preserves the more likely original reading.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Masoretic text does. But yeah, when it comes to which language it was originally, it's
Yeah.
Hebrew.
Obviously.
The New Testament was written in
Obviously.
Greek. The Old Testament in predominantly Hebrew.
Yeah,
Some
no
a
one's
little bit of
claiming the
Aramaic.
Masoretic version is the original Hebrew version.
Right. Yeah.
We're saying that there is a Hebrew version that is the ancestor of these two.
Right.
Did I hear that
Um,
correctly? That some
yeah.
of the Old Testament was Aramaic?
Some of it, yeah, a
So
little
yeah,
bit.
Daniel and
Daniel,
Ezra. Daniel and
Yeah,
Ezra,
but Daniel
portions
was
of it.
so late. I mean,
Per-
Daniel, that was written during the whole,
Yeah, it's the
second
second century
century.
BC.
So
While we're on this, I've got a quick question. I'm going to reveal my ignorance here, but I mean, this is something that I was told as a child,
Oh yeah.
and I suspect that my parents who told me this were wrong about it, like they've proven to be wrong about so many things. But when I was a kid, my parents told me that Hebrew was once a completely dead language, that nobody spoke it, and then they artificially revived it.
Yeah, I mean,
Really?
yeah,
Well,
kinda.
it
Like
wasn't.
it was.
It wasn't used as a vernacular for a few centuries because Jews would have spoken like the local language wherever they lived.
Yeah.
There is I have heard about though there is I think it's Pekian in Israel that there have been Jewish people living there without break, but I doubt they would have necessarily have kept Hebrew throughout that time. They probably would have adopted to whichever
Arabic.
empire was, Arabic or
Okay.
whatever.
But yeah, I mean,
Hebrew
I
as
think
a
Samaritans, I believe they speak Hebrew.
yeah, but that's a
Okay.
different dialect. But
Yeah,
so
I
that
think
Hebrew
so.
wasn't used as like a first language.
Yeah.
This is what we speak to each other. But because you had Jews living in Europe speaking Yiddish, like a Germanic language with Hebrew influence, and people speaking Ladino in the Ottoman Empire, and even like Judeo-Arabic, and when they would meet for commerce, their common language would have been Hebrew. So they were able to, because they could read it and they used it for prayers and study and everything, they were able to use it as a sort of, I don't know what the word is, like a
so
sort of
some part of it was preserved and used as the basis of the reconstruction. It wasn't just reconstructed wholesale out of nothing.
The reconstruction is actually trying to be a bit more. I don't know, it's like classic. So it's like what the people would have been using would have actually have been like developed over time, and it would like there's like
Of course.
like even in the Talmud, the Hebrew that they use has already got like influences from Aramaic, and it's developed its own idiosyncrasies, like the plurals are different and whatnot. But like
Language
the
is
revival of
alive.
Hebrew actually goes back to biblical Hebrew. So actually,
Mm.
it's probably easier for someone who speaks modern Hebrew to read the Bible than it is for them to read the Mishnah.
I mean, yeah.
Well,
for the
that
most
is
part.
the only
Yeah.
part of Hebrew culture that Christianity didn't voraciously destroy, but rather sort of preserved. So, go sort of, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, Kip is right. There's Hebrew versions that reflect the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls better. And language is alive. People forget that. The process of evolution people make a big deal of it as applies to biology because God done made everything and we came from dirt and incest, not no monkeys. But
And
the process of common ancestry and divergence and natural things changing in ways that you wouldn't predict is very much the same in language. There are some slightly different rules, obviously, but it's, the English we speak here is not the same as ancient English.
And
just,
the Hebrew.
sorry.
Just want to say the Hebrew revival was like in the late 1800s. Like the first person who spoke Hebrew from home, like they were brought up with it as their first language, was born in like 1880 something. So it was they developed it over quite a period, and I think there was a period where they were like, oh, like if these poor Ashkenazi Jews that are like coming during the late 1800s, early 1900s, like we've got schools, come in, don't speak Yiddish. Like that's the language of the weak European Jew. Like come here, like toil the land, speak Hebrew. Like there was an interesting like part of the revival was not forced, but like there was a bit of that sort of
it
thing.
Was eliminating the elements that had evolved in the survival of millennia in another land.
There was like also the conflict between like should we teach in German because that's the global thing, or we should teach in Hebrew. And there's all I want to just comment on one chatter who said that he heard that Yiddish was banned in Israel. No, it is not. In fact,
this period,
the
what I'm
Orthodox
talking about. Yeah, if it was banned in like certain businesses and schools, I'm talking about like before Israel became a country.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
This is a long time ago.
Yeah,
and then
but
we're talking about
mostly
like the kibbutz, early kibbutz era. Like the sort of communal living. And
why
these
is it that when the fundamentalist religious people of any group are in charge, everything becomes
these were
really
more in a way these are almost like fundamental secularists.
Yeah, maybe even
like
socialists, you could say.
They were socialists.
I mean, but that completely off topic. We need to we need to focus on Samuel. Okay.
Who isn't even in this chapter.
Yeah. On verse 49, forehead in Hebrew mitzcho, derived from metzach. Although this meaning is attested by early translations and accepted by commentators, Kimchi asks how could a stone hit Goliath's forehead if it was covered by his helmet? He notes that some say that when Goliath said, "I will give your flesh to the birds of the skies," he looked up, remembering the birds of the skies, and his helmet dropped. He says that it was a midrash, but I couldn't find it anywhere where it is exactly. He writes, however, that since David's victory over Goliath is considered a miracle, there is no point in asking that question. Regardless, he and Gersonides proposed that the stone hit an uncovered spot of Goliath's forehead through God's will. Klein notes Ariela Deem's suggestion that the word metzach should be understood as greave, i.e. an armor for the shin. Thus, David aimed at the shin bone immediately above the tip of the greave. The stone hit at the place left open so the knee could move. Tsumura, however, writes that this probably wouldn't have knocked a giant down, and certainly would not have left him helpless when David came and took his sword. Also, I don't think that's
it's that the ammunition that David was using was 62 grains, and the helmet was made of tinfoil.
Where does it say the hit? Where it doesn't say where he struck the stone.
El mitzcho.
Yeah, it was a tinfoil helmet. He was trying to keep
which verse is... Oh, yeah,
49. Vatitba Eved b'mitzcho, and the stone was stuck down in his forehead.
Yeah.
It's worth pointing out that slingers were actually the precursor to archers in battle. Like you can, if you practice with a sling, hit a very clear mark, and that was actually a part of warfare in more primitive times. So a sling is a real weapon.
Yeah, I forgot. So it was probably using 77 grains then.
Yeah, I learned it from I learned it from Civilization 5.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What was it that Luke said? He shoot a rat or something. Or whatever.
Okay.
It's based on this.
I'll continue on verse 52. Judah. Klein writes that the reference to Judah is perhaps anachronistic, meant to indicate the wholehearted commitment to the chase. Bar-Efrat, however, writes that the Judites are mentioned separately because the war was in their territory's border. Tsumura writes that there were divisions between Judah and the rest of Israel from the earliest time of Davidic monarchy, as we see in 11:8, 15:4, and 2 Samuel 21. On Gath, the Hebrew Bible reads Gai. The reading Gath is attested in the Septuagint and the Lucianic recension. This reading is favored by McCarter and Klein, based on Gath's appearance at the end of the verse. Auld writes that the letters of Gai and Gat are readily confused. Tsumura writes that from the description to the Gai Valley and to the Ekron Gate, the Gai Valley seems to refer to the valley which leads to Gat.
Just a quick point there that Dr. Kip mentioned. That when we have these things where we're like, oh, the Septuagint says this, the Masoretic says this, and we're like, it's possible that the Masoretic is preserving an older reading. Sometimes, because the Dead Sea Scrolls are fragmentary, we're able to use those fragments to actually confirm our prediction that the Septuagint is preserving the older thing. Because sometimes we actually go to the Dead Sea Scrolls and be like, this is older and it is the same as the Septuagint rather than being the same as the Masoretic.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes honestly it goes the other way too. There are definitely some elements of the Septuagint that are corrupted by translation and by ideological elements of the day. Alma, Parthenos, we'll get to that in the New Testament. But
yeah, I got to get to this other comment. Kip Davis says, so what is the smallest bear?
We did that already. Sun bear.
Yeah, well, you guys we were both wrong. I mean, it's often assumed to be the sun bear, but it's in fact the teddy.
Aww.
Or even smaller, the water bear, also known as the tardigrade.
Come on, the tardigrade. Oh my God!
It's bigger on the inside.
That depends on whether or not it's in water. Oh, we are such nerds. I love this so much.
I'm proud of that one. Tardigrade. It's bigger on the inside.
Don't you have more comments to read, or is that it?
Yeah, well, Kip, you might have covered this one too, I think. Kip Davis says we also have Hebrew versions that reflect the Septuagint text in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And Kip adds that, and Aramaic. So lazy, Lawrence. This is what's in the private chat. I know that you had this full-on argument.
Literally said Aramaic.
Yeah.
Yep. I saw that in the chat too.
Yeah.
But I don't know what other comments you might be referring to.
No, that's it. I thought that was it.
Okay.
No, Kip just needs to get on the line with us and say these things to our face. Come on, Kip.
Don't taunt a man like that.
Aaron, I think you might like the latest Josephus quote in the comments.
The latest Josephus comment?
Yeah.
Is he doing another spirit science rant?
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
I feel like we should be talking about 1 Samuel.
Yeah, I still have commentary and
yeah,
Christians.
that would be good.
Yeah.
Let's not distract Aaron. Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
We could talk about the latest episode of The Boys, but yeah, we should be doing.
Maybe not.
Oh, it's just the typical. He doesn't know what a theory is in science. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Moving back to interesting things.
Yeah, I'm on verse 54 about Jerusalem. The mention of Jerusalem is odd, given that Jerusalem was not conquered by David from the hands of the Jebusites until 2 Samuel 5 verses 6 through 9. Moreover, Jerusalem is not mentioned elsewhere in 1 Samuel. Kimchi notes that his father Joseph thought that Jerusalem was Nob, the city of the priests, where the sword is said to be in 21:10. Klein notes some of the opinions regarding this. Quote, Perhaps Jerusalem is where this trophy eventually wound up, just as the body of Saul was brought from its first burial place at Yabesh Gilead to the tomb of Kish. Compare 2 Samuel 21 verses 12 through 14 and Willis. Carlson suggested that David threw the head over the walls of Philistine-held Jerusalem. Jacob H. Gronbeck proposed that the reference to Jerusalem resulted from the fact that this story was eventually transmitted there. End quote. Tsumura notes that some scholars, like Hertzberg and McCarter, suggested that there was a tradition in Jerusalem that Goliath's head was preserved there as a kind of relic, quote-unquote. He writes, however, that there is no clear evidence for this view. Instead, he writes that this may be a, quote, proleptical history writing, end quote. Jerusalem here might refer proleptically to a suburb of Jerusalem, if not the Jebusite city itself. He argues that by the time of the author or narrator of the episode, the outside of the walled city had been called Jerusalem. He writes, quote, while one may take the biblical description to be historically true, as referring to the historical fact, the description itself has to be from the historian's use of language. No one would claim it as unhistorical if a historian uses the Greek term Mesopotamia for the description of the early dynastic Sumerian society in the 3rd millennium BC. End quote. On he put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent, Klein comments, according to the Masoretic text, David put the giant's weapons in his own tent. Hertzberg remarks that the youthful David would have had no tent and demands the text to read tent of Yahweh. For Hertzberg, this would be the tent shrine at Mitzpah. Others make a similar emendation but locate this shrine at Nob, where David eventually found and borrowed the sword of Goliath, which we see in 1 Samuel 21 verses 9 through 10, which in the Old Testament is 8 through 9. McCarter retains the Masoretic text with regard to David's tent, but asks whether the head of Goliath was taken to Nob instead of Jerusalem.
That is a weird verse in total.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Very weird. What did they do with the head?
I can imagine what David and Jonathan did with the head.
No.
Well, not that head.
I was wondering which of his weapons he took back to his tent, and I was thinking maybe the girthy spear.
Oh God.
The spear. Well, apparently I was quite sensual reading about the spear, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, finally, on verse 55, whose son is that young man? This question seems odd, since David played before Saul, and it is told that Saul loved David. Now, I separated this between traditional commentators and modern commentators. So, the traditionals, Rashi, citing Talmud Yevamot 76b, writes, and it is quite long but amusing, Saul saw David behaving in a kingly manner. Saul said, if he comes from the family of Peretz, he will become king, for the king may break fences, poretz, to make way for himself, and no one may object. If, however, he comes from the family of Zerach, he will become an important person. Doeg said to him, before you ask whether or not he is descended from a family which qualifies him for the throne, ask whether or not he is qualified to enter by marriage into the congregation of Israel, because he is descended from Ruth the Moabite. Abner responded to him, we have learned that an Ammonite is forbidden, as in Deuteronomy 23:4, but not a female Ammonite, the same holding true for a female Moabite. So Doeg said to him, if so, only a male mamzer, bastard, verse 3 there, and not a mamzeret, i.e. female mamzer, should be forbidden. He replied, it is stated here, because they did not meet you with bread and water, and it is not customary for a woman to do so, in verse 5 there. He said to him, men should have met men, and women should have met women with bread and water. Abner became silent.
Oh, I don't have the Oved became silent. In,
Oh my god.
Really?
So they really
Oh, it's a continuation.
Also, Doeg is like Rashi seems to think that Doeg was just hanging around all of this time, but like I don't think he's mentioned in the text until much later.
Yeah,
right?
he mentioned later on, I think, in chapter.
It's good to know that Christian
18.
apologists aren't the only ones that are incredibly full of shit. Although I have to say, the more you read these commentaries, the more I am convinced that rabbis were the original AO3. I mean, it's just
He
fan
was. I
fiction.
think he's just quoting from a Targum.
Yeah,
and
I
Targums were
just
seen
mentioned that.
Yeah, and Targums were kind of seen as like they were translations, but they had like these additional bits, and they were just seen as being like divinely inspired, but not necessarily canon, and like
Yeah, but
they're like midrashic.
that's
You
too
know,
much
they're
fan
kind of like
fiction.
Yeah.
expanded narratives on it to answer
Yeah.
any questions someone would have. Yeah. So it does seem like the what Targum did you say that was?
Not Targum, it's Talmud Yevamot 76.
Oh, I thought you said Targum. Okay.
Okay, so it's a
It was
midrash
based
in the Talmud.
Targum.
So it's
Okay.
Talmud. Okay.
So it's not
Yeah.
Targum.
A
Sorry.
lot of stretching there to make things fit.
Yeah, I still have some of their commentaries. Gersonides wrote that Saul did not know all of his servants personally, and that Saul asked if David was appropriate for kinship, since Saul is going to give him his daughter for wife. Kimchi cites his father Joseph, that Saul asked if David's father was also a mighty warrior, since David went to Goliath without fear. Titrani wrote that because the evil spirit rested upon Saul, he did not have a good memory. Pseudophilo, in Biblical Antiquity 61:9, wrote that the angel of the Lord changed David's appearance, and so no one recognized him. Yeah. Now the moderns, Tsumura writes that even if Saul knew David, he wouldn't remember David's father's name, since a king would not take note of the name of his servant's father. Saul is asking about David's background so that he may ask his father to let him keep David permanently. Auld notes the possibility that Saul's non-recognition of David is, quote, a sign of increasing unpredictability, even developing madness, end quote. But it is also possible that Saul may have thought, when David rejects wearing his armor, that he also withdrew from his challenge. In that case, quote, the king may have been no more aware that David was the youth going out to meet the Philistine than he has been of Jonathan's earlier solo exploit. 1 Samuel 14, end quote. That's it.
I think Saul is just salty that his son steals his boyfriend in the next couple chapters.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, now for the Christians, and there's a lot of them.
Oh God!
oh wait, oh my God.
Wait, this is for the chapter or just for this verse?
The chapter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, just I think in one section is a lot. I don't remember.
Let's see.
No,
this
actually,
is okay. We already know there's going to be a lot of connections here, right? Because the
Yeah.
whole because the Jesus story
Jesus.
is supposed to be justified through the David line, right? So like, of course, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff here.
David
let's see.
precludes Jesus, and the stone precludes the Spirit of God entering into you.
Oh, how about so something
Forcibly.
about an unexpected king defeating a terrible
Okay. This
evil
is
force. or
such
something
a
like that.
trope. Even AO3 is tired of it. Oh, look, the poor little boy. He has no strength, but his power of heart will overcome the big bad monster.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Let's see if we got
who-
close with our.
who is it who
Christian
said that-
commentary, I guess.
Thomas, who is it you said that he changed appearance?
Pseudophilo.
Sort of
The
like,
angel of the
okay, so
Lord
he was-
changed him.
So he like, I need to go battle this Philistine. He did like a magic girl transformation.
Yeah, Sailor
know.
Moon.
How come we never hear from the real Philo?
Because I think Philo
Because
is
I'm
more
making
He's
him
written
mostly
a whole bunch of stuff.
yeah he
Yeah,
did,
yeah.
but I think I did mention Philo a lot on the Pentateuch.
The real Philo was Jewish. He wasn't like
He was.
he wouldn't have been like doing sort of things.
He also mostly wrote on philosophy, anyways.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like he would.
I wasn't sure if I was even hearing that right because pseudo-philo, belly fat, dinosaur man. I'm not sure exactly what Tomer is talking about.
All is in my bibliography.
Philo
Not really.
dough, which makes spanakopita and theropita and various other delicious Greek foods.
Well, I'll start with the Christians.
And Malawach.
So,
We're
Malawach
going to
is
start with the
Yemenite.
Christians.
Yeah, but that's
I-
also made from philo, right? It's the same thing.
No, okay, never mind. No, let's not
Okay.
go in there. Okay,
Sorry.
so maybe Lawrence will get this. So Paulus Orosius wrote that Scripture, foreseeing that heresy would arise from within the church, describes Goliath as being positioned on this side.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah, I mean and it is not surprising if Scripture, foreseeing our present situation, comments appropriately when it says the Philistines were standing on top of the mountain on this side, since the individual who is attacking the Pelagian heresy
Oh
is
my
now
God,
being
right.
banished from the
Oh.
church.
My God. Okay.
This is a pastor who has run out of sermon ideas.
No, this is okay. That's quite funny. So they're relating it to the Pelagians. So that's about the 400s around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really really funny actually. So the Pelagians were initially, well, we could say run off into what would be like Britain and Ireland now. So that's where they were run off to. Yeah, it is quite funny. The God, who I forget the name of like the big Pelagian guy, like the guy who really
Pelagius?
popularized it.
Darth Pelagius.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, Pelagius. Yeah, I guess that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the yeah, so his group of people were run off into that part of the continent.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and they believe that humans were born sinless and could choose to live sinless lives by responding to God's commands autonomously, that is, without further dependence upon divine insistence beyond that which the commands imparted.
Yeah, there were some that were like, oh well, Jesus isn't really necessary for salvation, because they're like, well, as long as you're like a good person, and then
How
of course,
dare they want
right.
people to be good?
How
and
dare
not
they?
want to focus on blood
so-
magic and human sacrifice?
So because it removed the necessity of Jesus, at least according to the opponents, therefore it was this awful heretical thing, because they suggested that there was that people had like an intrinsic grace to them, but then if they wanted to be even like more special, then they could be like Christians, because you had to explain the good pagans, like why are some pagan people good if they are not instilled with grace? It's like, well, that because there is like a base level grace, and then there's like the super grace for for all the Christians. So yeah, lots of interesting theological points with those.
Yeah. Oh, and the quote that I said, it was partial. It reads, "Since the individual who is attacking the Pelagian heresy is now being banished from the church, while the heretic is found to be nourished at its very breast."
Like
Not my
just
breast.
like in the Odes of Solomon.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Okay. Bede wrote that the refreshment David brings to his brothers typifies the perfect humility Christ brought to his disciples. Caesarius
Bread.
of Arel, Caesarius of Arel wrote that by sending David with food to look for his brothers, Jesse typified God the Father, who sent Jesus to free humanity from the devil's power.
Ugh.
And David's arrival and subsequent battle with Goliath symbolize Christ's advent and victory over the devil.
Yeah, see, so I was like basically right. Yeah.
Exactly. Bring your brothers sandwiches. That makes me God. Yeah, this is logic.
Yeah. Again, Caesarius of Arel wrote that in chiding David, Eliab signified the Jewish people who jealously slandered Christ, who came for the salvation of the human race. There's more.
Sure, Jan.
Yeah.
So
Origin.
the
Sorry.
Jews are like Jesus' older brother. intelligent.
You
Who
could say
tells
that.
him to smarten up and not be such a dumbass? Yeah. How very
Yeah.
dare they?
Yeah. Origen wrote that we must beg Christ, the spiritual David, to abolish all evil high councils when battling Satan. David's killing of both, Caesarius of Agal wrote that David's killing of both lion and bear prefigures the Lord's victory over the devil when he ascended into hell to free the saints from his jaws.
Ascended into hell.
Descended.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were giving it.
Which is part of the Apostles' Creed. Gotta love that.
Yeah. Cajun wrote that rather than arming himself as those he saw around him, David wisely chose weaponry appropriate for his stature and youth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Theodoret wrote that as simple weapons prove victorious, so defenders of true religion need arguments that plainly proclaim the truth without causing strife. Onlookers who object to this means should remain silent. Onlookers who object to this means should remain silent.
So, the more simple-minded your arguments, the better your defense of the faith. That explains the entire history of apologetics. Oh my God. Because I swear, how many people, apologia jumps to mind, how many people have been deconverted by how fucking idiotic apologists were and how dishonest. Myself, so many times I came to the point where it was like, nothing true needs to be defended by this many lies. That's just not how truth works. No.
I have to read another comment from Kip Davis. I have gotten nothing done the past couple of hours. I hope you all are happy.
Yes, actually, I am.
Me neither.
So
Kip.
we're not.
Me neither.
We're not happy because you didn't join us here.
Yeah.
Yes. For shame, Kip. For shame.
I can't do the show, but I'll be in the comment section for the whole thing.
Paulinus of Nola wrote that the faith that trusts Christ and regards God alone as highest prevails over all weapons. Maximus of Turin wrote that David killed Goliath with a stone, which symbolizes the power of Christ, in a battle that figuratively teaches the superiority of heavenly weapons over earthly ones.
Of course. Oh my God.
Yeah. And Chrysostom wrote that in order to be victorious in battle, we must take hold of the spiritual stone, or Christ, which prevailed over Goliath. And two more. Bede wrote that as David used Goliath's sword to slay him, so the Lord transforms sinners into instruments of righteousness.
What?
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah.
The stupid, it burns.
How come no one said just like David used the stone to kill Goliath, Jesus uses the church because Peter founded the church and he's a stone or whatever, as a weapon.
Good one.
I mentioned Maximus of Turin, who said that the stone symbolizes the power of Christ.
Yeah,
well,
but
that's
I'm
different
saying,
than Peter, because Peter, the Petros means rock. So and he was supposed to be the foundation of the church. That's why there's that whole section. I think, what is it, Matthew, or I forget which gospel it was, but he was upon this rock I will build my church. So that's,
I guess it just sounds more violent when you're the church is the weapon of Jesus. And
hey, it does kind of get that way though. It gets that way in a lot of words.
Yeah. And finally, Augustine wrote that David demonstrates how the one who wears God's armor and fights for Christ's glory may be victorious and remain with the truth. There you go.
Oh boy.
President Christopher offers $5 and says, why not steal from Walmart if there's no God? They're rich. I'm broke. I had a stroke. Am a failed rapper. I need the self-esteem to be truly happy.
You know what?
I would
Mr.
argue
President
that you
Christopher?
need to eat.
You go ahead, buddy.
Yeah.
I can chime in on that because
it's
I have
stage capitalism, and they've been stealing our labor for years. So you know what? Turnabout is fair play.
I've been on President Christopher's channel. I think he needs to be a little bit more respectful first and stop making videos about his long forearms. That's creeping me out.
Okay.
To Mr.
He
and
was
Mrs.
showing it off in
Christopher, a
his
son
profile.
president.
He's got a channel, and he's kind of I think enamored with Arn, because most of his videos are about Arn, or he's tagging Arn, and yeah, it's sad.
Are you sure you're not confusing him with you?
No,
Aren't you an acolyte of Aaron,
Yeah, that's what I
apparently,
thought.
according to someone?
because I have hair. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Also, Aaron, what is demanded of your acolytes? Because I don't know if we qualify, but if you started a cult,
I wasn't aware
feel
that
like
I
should know
had.
this.
I qualify
Where that I
apparently.
had acolytes. Yeah, I've been told an awful lot about my followers. I don't think I have followers. Why? But I have literally people who follow me on Facebook or Twitter, but I don't think that's the same thing as what they're implying.
Well, next time I see you in person, I'll steal some of your beer. Does that count?
In all fairness, Arn, with that Jeep you have, it's going to be hard to follow you everywhere.
Four-wheel drive.
Tim Davidson offers $2 and says the line episode Pooh was talking about the line
Earlier
episode that
on.
Pooh was talking about is August 4th, 153:20.
Yeah, so that's the one where Keith from South Africa, the one who's actually flatsoid.
Oh,
Okay.
a South African flat earther. I didn't know they had those in the Southern Hemisphere.
Well, it's kind of interesting because because I've done this, I got a plane, or it was a couple of flights, but I took a flight from Johannesburg
Mm-hmm.
to Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the only flight I've ever been on in my life that actually fits the flat Earth projection model of the Earth. It's the only one. It's a straight line from Johannesburg, South Africa to Dallas, Texas, going straight over the North Pole. Not
Okay,
kidding.
then. I believe you. I just think it's hilarious. I very much doubt, however, that the time and fuel projections match the flat Earth.
But it's not precise straight line, but it really is the only flight in my life that fit that polar projection map. Because
That's
remember,
awesome.
I've also flown from San Francisco to Auckland, New Zealand, and no, that was very different. As was
I think-
Sydney to Los Angeles. Again, impossible on the flat Earth map.
Yeah, it's relatively accurate for any flight that kind of goes through the northern hemisphere only, and like if you're going from like Europe to America, it would be pretty accurate as well. But obviously, you wouldn't
I would
wanna
love to
use
take a
that
flat
flight
earther
rate.
from
Okay.
Johannesburg to Santiago, Chile. That would be a fun.
Have you guys been seeing the stuff about what are they calling it? The final experiment or
The
something like
final
that?
experiment,
Where they're,
yes.
Yeah, where they're taking a trip to Antarctica,
Yeah,
right?
in December.
And they are, and they're seeing.
Continent that doesn't exist that they're not allowed to go to because of the armada that stands between us.
Right, of course. Yeah, they the experiment would be to see if there is any time that the sun
24-hour
would stay up for 24 hours. Yep,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because that would make it
Are they
impossible.
going
And-
at the right time of year?
And
for
the
that?
December.
the best debunking so far is that they picked a place with a mountain nearby, so you can't see the sun set behind the mountain. I'm not kidding.
Wow. All right.
Even though the sun stays
So wouldn't it be better
above
to
the
do the
mountain
Antarctica
for the
thing?
entire time.
Wouldn't it be better to do the Antarctica thing and the Alaska trip both in the same week?
That would make sense.
Aaron,
Yeah, but
stop,
then Alaska
stop
would
be dark.
expecting
Alaska would just be
conspirators to
dark.
make sense.
Just to be clear here, this is the final experiment was set up by a globe earther. That was his
Yeah,
idea. He was like, listen, this
Yeah.
would prove it one way or the other. So
Yeah, he's inviting
They're
12
connecting to
flat
West
earthers
Eerdmans.
and 12 globe earthers to go there and check out whether or not the sun stays in the sky for 24 hours. And now the flat earthers all
I
have
heard
the
there's
knickers in a
possibly
twist
one flat
because
earther
They've all made videos that that's impossible on a flat Earth, and now they're coming up with explanations on how it's possible on a flat Earth. Yeah.
Well,
I've seen a tiny dome. Everyone has a personal tiny dome, and that reflects the sun, and therefore the sun's visible 24/7, except when it isn't.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, most
I am
men.
not nearly high enough for this much flat talk. Let's get back to the Bible.
I think.
I think
yeah.
I think most men by a certain age will have a personal dome that reflects the sun.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Kudos.
I'm glad my age is uncertain at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Maybe not most men. Sorry.
All right,
quite a lot.
so
of them.
Tomer has finished his commentary.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so we spent a full 2 hours
Yeah.
on one chapter.
It was a long chapter, and it was an important chapter. There was a lot going on.
158.
I'm thinking probably this next chapter we're not going to be doing tonight.
No.
Yeah. So
my backer.
as I and I was hoping that some of the rest of y'all would maybe see me up there, but I'm guessing not. I will not be here on Saturday. I will be in Sarnia, Ontario, Canada for BahaCon.
I wish
If
I could.
you're if you're
Which
in
I was-
Southern Ontario, if you're in the vicinity of Detroit, Michigan, and want to jump over to the Canadian side for a bit, we'll be up there this weekend. They've got me speaking at 9:00 on a Sunday morning, so I'll be the only one in the room.
So
Iced
basically,
coffee.
you won't be up for that.
I was disappointed.
So it just means that I
when
can't
Tom
party
and
the night before because I have to be up early to be the only one in the auditorium when I speak. 9 a.m.
I felt disappointed for you when Tomer explained that this was a atheist appreciation day and not a
I didn't say.
pagan
Did I say
appreciation
this?
day. Oh, wasn't you who said it?
I think it was somebody else. On the comment.
Oh
or
yeah,
maybe
atheist
with
appreciation
Satan
day.
in the Discord.
Oh yes, Satan.
Which you should
I
join.
would come if I could. I literally cannot. But I absolutely forbid you to do the next chapter without me, because this is where David buys a wife with a bag of dicks, and you will not do it without me.
Okay, well, we're going to be doing that 1 week from tonight.
Yeah.
So
Tuesday.
next Tuesday, the assembled panel, so far as I know, have all agreed that we're good for Tuesday next.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it works.
All right. Well, thank you. 1 Samuel 18, 1 week from tonight. And I've got one more comment from Lord Illuminous Pooh, who offers $2 and says I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I want to buy Aaron a beer. Dark, duh. Yeah. Well, I'm a few hours north of you, but otherwise I'm down with that. And Lord Illuminous Pooh offers $2 more and says, keep partying until you speak. Yeah.
Please join the Discord.
I'll just
please
all
join the
night
Discord.
long. I will be lit and sleep deprived, and so my presentation will be that much better.
Love it.
Mm,
Classic.
But I can't do that because as soon as I speak, I then have to go to the airport.
Oh, yeah. They expect you to be sober for flight these days. I don't know why. It's silly.
Yeah. It's not like I'm the one driving.
I think they just want to sell you the alcohol on the plane. That's why.
True.
yeah.
True.
Yeah.
That's why they take away
All
your
right.
bottles of water, so they can sell you overpriced bottles of water when you get past security.
Mm.
So I am
Just-
very
just
much enjoying this series, and I want to thank everybody participating, thank everybody watching, and I will say good night.
Bye bye.
Good night. Join the Discord. The only important thing you're gonna do tonight.